What is a true fact so baffling it should be false? Part 1. There is a 1 in roughly 5.2 to the 61st power chance that if you were to slap a table, all of the molecules in your hand and the table would miss each other and your hand would go through it. Story time. I learned this fact from a deep intellectual conversation with my engineering class 2 years ago, so there very well could be some kind of detail I'm missing here. But nonetheless, what I said is theoretically true. There used to be a radioactive energy drink called Radiothor that was in the US market for a decade, from 1918 to 1928. Some of the more prominent users had to be buried in lead coffins. Did they take that off the market after some guy drank so many of them so quick that his lower jaw fell off? Apparently, he even developed holes in his skull. That's horrifying. Poor dude. Giant squids have a donut-shaped brain, so the esophagus can run through the middle. If they try to swallow too large a bite of food, they can get brain damage. It's crazy to think that giant squid used to be one of those mysterious sea monsters. It is though. That thing looks like something out of a nightmare. You could take away all of Wayne Gretzky's goals that he scored during his career and he would still be the all-time NHL points leader off his assists alone. Bonus, Gretzky fact, he and his brother own the record for being the highest scoring pair of siblings. Brent had 4 points in his whole career. Of every father-son combo in NHL history, Wayne and Trevor Gretzky have the most goals. Trevor Gretzky was a baseball player. Every day that you go to work, you pass more people than an average medieval passed in their entire lifetime. Every day, a medieval person sees more dead bodies littering the landscape than the average modern person does in their entire life. I wish it was still that way today. This planet is way too populated. The youngest mother to give birth became pregnant at 4 years old. She's still alive and resides in Peru, apparently. Lena Medina had a rare condition whereby her body went through puberty very early, making it possible for her to conceive a child. Her son was born via cesarean section when she was 5 years old, and 7 months older, and was raised as her younger brother. The father was never fully confirmed, though suspicion fell on male family members. The girl herself obviously had no clear recollection. If a gorilla looks grumpy, it's because they are relaxed and at ease. The USA is the third most populated nation on Earth. If you were able to add 1 billion people to the US population today, it would still be the third most popular nation on Earth. Depends on where we added those billion people from. If you moved 30% each of China's and India's population into the US would become the world's most populated nation as a result. By a couple of 100 million, in fact. And the only involves moving 840 million people. This was not an immigration formula. The hypothesis is just snap fingers and add a billion. The gravity of black holes is so great that it literally bends light around the black hole, so that if you could somehow stand close enough to a black hole and look straight ahead, you would actually see the back of your own head. Firstly, I would shave my own neck. Greenland extends east of, west of, south of, and north of Iceland. I love geography ones because they just mess with your head so hard when you hear them. Some other fun facts. Canada extends further south than 13 US states. 27 US states are at the least partial north of Canada's southernmost point. This includes California, which meets a state bordering Mexico, has parts of it that are north of parts of Canada. The westernmost point on the South American mainland is as far east as Florida. Heading directly south from most areas in the US will, after Mexico's Central America, will land you in the Pacific, and you won't hit land again before Antarctica. Canada has so much fresh water that if you count size based on dry land alone, it ranks as smaller than the US and China. Russia is closer to the US than it is to Crimea. When entering the Panama Canal, ships heading from the Atlantic side to the Pacific east side, likewise. To go from the Pacific to the Atlantic, you head west. France shares a land border with Brazil. When the 22nd president of the US, Grover Cleveland, was 27 years old, he was friends with a married couple who had a baby girl named Frances. As a gift, he bought them a high-end baby stroller for little Frances. 21 years later, he married Frances and she became the youngest First Lady. Think about that. This isn't mind-blowing or anything, but a fun presidential fact. Grover Cleveland was also the only US president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. He was the 22nd and the 24th president, with Benjamin Harrison, 23rd president, serving as the meat in the sandwich that was Grover Cleveland's 2 terms. A morbidly obese person can survive with absolute starvation without any sickness or feeling ill. Under close control, there have been studies since the 60s. There is a patient in 1973 who went under a 382-day starvation diet for therapeutic purposes under close control with only vitamin and mineral supplements. And water intake without protein, carbohydrate or fat intake. No food at all. Dropped from 207 kilograms to 88 kilograms and maintained it. After a follow-up checkup 5 years later, the patient was 96 kilograms, stabilized. Prolonged fasting had no ill effects. If anybody is curious about the article, the PubMed ID is PMC 2495396. Keep in mind, for anyone attempting to imitate multiple other attempts to after him wound up dead. Do not try this at home. It requires very strict supervision. From what I remember, a lot of deaths are from when they start eating again. You have to start back extremely slowly. People were deliberately infected with malaria to cure their syphilis, and the man who developed this treatment, Julius Wagner Jurek, received the Nobel Prize for it. The extremely high fevers of the malaria infections killed the syphilis bacteria when the patients were cured of malaria using quinine. Quinine is the reason tonic water glows under black light. TIL, tonic water glows under black light. The life of Fern, the luckiest unlucky man in the world. In January 1962, Fern is riding on a train through a freezing canyon when it fell into an icy river. All 17 other passengers died, while he escapes with a broken arm and hypothermia. 1963, on his first plane trip, he was sucked out of the plane's door and landed in a haystack unscathed. 19 other people were killed in the crash. In 1966, he was riding in a bus when it skidded off the road into yet another icy river. 4 passengers drowned, while he only received some minor cuts and bruises. In 1970, his car engine burst into flames while he was driving, but he managed to escape before it exploded. In 1973, in yet another driving incident, his car's engine was doused with hot oil from a broken fuel pump. This caused flames to shoot through the air vents, singeing off all his hair. He was otherwise unharmed. In 1995, he was hit by a bus but only sustained minor injuries. 1996, to escape a head-on collision with a United Nations truck on a mountain curve, he swerved into a guardrail that broke on impact. To save himself, he jumped out of his car's open door and grabbed onto a tree branch as he watched his car plummet off the cliff. Suffice to say, the guy had a complicated relationship with the Grim Reaper. Giraffes eat bones. When I was in Africa, we were legit surrounded by a family of 12 giraffes. Then one bent over and picked up a gazelle carcass, looked dead into our eyes as it ate its leg. It was so creepy. TASER is actually an acronym for Thomas A. Swift's Electric Rifle, TASER. Laser is also an acronym for light amplified by stimulated emissions of radiation. SCUBA is an acronym for self-contained underwater breathing apparatus. Ireland was a net exporter of food during the Great Potato Famine. That's what caused the famine. The Brits exported all the food and the Irish were left with only one small kind of potato for themselves, which then was afflicted with the disease. More people died making the V2 rockets during World War II than were killed by them. Another fun fact about V2 rockets? Germany was facing a large issue with rocket fuel shortages during the project because people kept drinking it. The fuel was made from 70% ethyl alcohol and 30% water, distilled from potatoes. It was the most economically viable fuel at the time, since they were already very low in other fuels. To stop workers from drinking it, they denatured the alcohol, essentially poisoning it, but people kept drinking it anyway and getting extremely ill. This simply caused people to start leaving the V2 program, suggesting that they were only in it for the free alcohol. This also means that any alcohol over 70% ABV is stronger than actual World War II rocket fuel. TSA's fail rate is over 80%. I personally know someone who, in his carry-on, accidentally packed a loaded handgun, made it on the plane, and was so freaked out when he landed, he UPS'd it back home and took a Greyhound bus back after his trip. I know a dumbass that flew internationally with a handgun in his checked luggage, on accident, but still a dumb, mean guy. He left out of Florida, heading for South Korea with a layover in Japan. The Japanese found it and he was arrested and spent over 2 weeks in jail. They let him go.